Hey everyone, welcome to the 281st episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have an awesome show for you today. We're going to be talking about fine-grained location, things that Google is doing. I feel like these are Jeopardy categories now. We are also going to talk about earthquakes, stories from DEF CON, and a lot of little news bits that involve smart things, Wise, facial recognition, and fitness, plus a little bit of sleep tracking. All of this, and we're going to be talking to our guest this week, who is Bill Byther, the CEO of Machine Metrics. We're going to be talking about factory data, sharing machine data, and the impact of COVID-19 on manufacturing. We'll also hear from this week's sponsor, Very. But first, let's take a moment to hear from another one of our awesome sponsors, Silicon Labs. If you have anything to do with the smart home, this is an event I think you're going to want to attend. Silicon Labs is hosting Works With, a free virtual smart home developer conference that's going to be happening on September 9th and 10th. Engineers from Google, Amazon, Samsung, and more will lead hands-on workshops, technical trainings, educational panels, all of this with the goal to train engineers, developers, and product managers how to design to work with any smart home ecosystem or wireless protocol. I am participating in the Works With event, and I'm excited to moderate a keynote panel on wireless protocols such as Project Chip. That's right, maybe we're going to hear more on that. Plus, what all of this means for the future of smart home development. Bring your tough questions, and we're going to do our best to get them answered. Register today for Works With by Silicon Labs and bring your teammates. Register at workswith.scilabs.com. I am really excited about that event because I'm hoping to learn about Chip.
Aren't we all?
I know. But now, this week, we're not going to learn about Chip. Instead, we're going to be learning about ultra-wideband Infira. Oh my gosh, y'all are like, what? So last week, we talked about Samsung not doing much on the smart home front, but they did announce a feature called Nearby Shared. You want to tell them what this is, Kevin?
Yeah, so for folks who have an Android phone, I believe it's Android 6.0 or better, you actually have this feature now because it was pushed out. And it's basically the Android equivalent of Apple's AirDrop. And if you're not familiar with that, what AirDrop is it lets you share a file, a photo, whatever it is, from one iOS device to another or to a Mac OS device, because AirDrop also works with Mac OS. And it's a wireless sharing feature that uses ultra wideband to determine what eligible devices are around to access or receive a file, and then it will use one of several different types of wireless protocols depending on which is the fastest and which devices have access to what radios and such. So Nearby Share is basically the version of that, but it's for Android. And it's a big deal because it's something that, as an iOS user up until last week, I have relied on with my family for years. It's been fantastic to share a photo quickly, just send it through the air, share it with AirDrop. Now you can do it with Nearby Share in Android.
But this is only Android to Android as opposed to Android to iOS.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that bothers me because wireless file sharing is wireless file sharing, right? It shouldn't be this siloed, but then again, SMS is SMS, and we have that siloed as well between Apple's messages for iOS and Google's messages.
This will become more of an issue, though, for people because while we're talking about it for sharing photos, what this is basically is a communication and authentication technology for between these devices. Maybe authentication's a little strong, but the way that you would look at it is, hey, I'm a device here capable of doing this, and I'm in this tiny space, and we're talking centimeter-based location. So they're using time of flight and angle of arrival. Just think basically complex math to say, this is how far away I am from something. And proximity here is key to kind of the security features because it can do it so there's not a man-in-the-middle attack. And the short burst of communications, which is a feature of ultra-wideband networks, that is basically like, it's so fast, it's both power efficient and a little bit more secure is the thought process.
It's kind of like the handshake.
Yeah. So we're excited about Nearby Share, but for the IoT, this is a much bigger deal because it's going to allow you to do things like with asset tracking. So think about something like your tile having centimeter level information. So now your tile can say, hey, your house keys, they're not just in your room, they're next to your couch. Now, That does imply that your device knows where your couch is, which today it doesn't. But if it were next to another device, it could. Or it could show you on some sort of map on your home.
Yeah, even just a direction, like a rangefinder almost, so you get right upon whatever it is you've lost.
Although you can do that today. You tell it to beep and it'll just beep at you until you find it. But it's still very cool. It also is cool for something like door locks. They will still communicate with your phone, maybe via Bluetooth, but Bluetooth doesn't know what side of the door you're on. So this is the kind of technology that helps know that you're on the outside of your door and you want to come in, as opposed to like walking by the inside of your door when you're going to answer it and then suddenly unlocking it for someone, which is a worry people have. The current ways that lock manufacturers do that are bespoke. So this provides like a standard way of doing that. And then the other thing is it just gives you the ability to say, if I'm next to a lamp and I say, turn this lamp on, it will know that I'm next to that lamp. So it gives you that presence detection that Kevin and I've talked about at a very super fine grain level. We're not there yet. NXP, I talked to them this week about this because they're the chip inside these Samsung phones. But what they're going to be doing the second half of this year, they're going to be launching modules and chips designed for the IoT around this. And we're going to start to see way more stuff happening here. So this is kind of like a sneak peek, but it's a cool sneak peek because second half, we're going to see stuff around asset tracking, access control, and maybe cool stuff like where you are in your home. So stay tuned for all that.
So I'm just going to say I'm looking forward to this as a universal remote, meaning my phone is my universal remote for my entire house. And I don't have 6 different or 10 different lights to tap in a home app. I just have one light app, maybe one light button. And I just point the phone at that one. And because of ultra wideband, it knows that's the light I mean to turn on or turn off.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Google because there's a bunch of stuff. So first up, Google screwed up.
Yep. Not for the first time and not for the last.
So what they did is they accidentally enabled a feature for some users with a recent software update. They've now rolled that back. So everything I'm telling you is no longer the case, but it is a little frustrating. So what they did is they put an update. The idea was they would listen for things like glass breaking and other things, smoke alarms. Your Amazon Echo, if you enable this, it will do this too. You do have to go into the app and enable the guard feature. When Google did theirs, they didn't actually have you enable it. So what it does is basically your smart home speaker then is always listening for these sounds, which means your smart home speaker is always listening. And that freaks people out.
Yeah.
And it should.
Yeah. But then again, if you're using like the Nest Aware feature that includes this, I guess they're always listening anyway because you've opted in and you're actually paying them to listen.
This is how these things work. Normally, these assistants work by listening for a wake word like hey, G, or Madam A. But with Amazon Guard, for example, when you turn that on, you only turn that on when you leave the house is the way theirs is set up. So if I say, Madam A, I'm leaving, it will actually turn that on. Then it's always listening for smoke alarms and glass break.
I don't think this is the way to do things. Because really, even if you say, I'm leaving, and that's tuned to you are leaving the house, that makes sense. But if you're not the only one there and somebody's staying at home, I guess you don't say, I'm leaving.
Right. I mean, unless it's like your kid or something. But then if it is just your kid, then they're going to be listened to while they're in the home.
Right. I mean, I hadn't thought about that until this incident happened. As I understand it, again, this is a Nest Aware feature that non-Nest Aware people got. And you'd think, hey, that's a good thing. I'm getting something for free. Except these people obviously don't want these speakers listening for sounds of glass, nor listening to themselves all the time. So that was the big hoo-ha over it. And I get that.
I will say, so this is why everyone's like, Stacey, why are you excited about machine learning at the edge? And this is an excellent case for bringing something like that to the edge because you could have those algorithms running on the edge device, which means they'd always be listening, but they wouldn't be sending any of that data to the cloud until it hears that data.
Right. Almost like a wake word.
Yeah, it becomes a wake word. So that's where things like that become really compelling, plus a commitment to doing that locally, which Google has seemed to be excited about committing to local processing. So I think you might see that from Google. You may not see it anytime soon from Amazon. I don't know.
I personally won't turn on such a feature until I know it's all local. And I'm convinced that it's all local in a sense. But this whole incident got me thinking. Back in the early smart home days, you pretty much had total control over everything. And that's, in a sense, a bad thing. That's what held back adoption because a lot of people don't want to have to deal with all the configuration and setup and all that. And so we've gotten into a more consumer-friendly smart home era. But it just hit me that we've really lost a lot of control over our smart homes because these devices can be changed at any time and not necessarily with our okay. A software update to a smart home hub or a Google Home or a Nest speaker, for example, like it just happened, people didn't even know they were being listened to. And that's another big part of that problem. But I don't want to dwell on that.
We talked about this last week, but like with the Mellow sous vide cooker, they actually took back functionality that users had.
Right. And it wasn't like that back in the day when you had to do it all yourself. But of course, we don't want that because then it's just too hard and nobody will adopt it except the geeks like me, and that's fine. It's not good for the industry. So there's got to be some middle ground here because when I think about it, when I buy a smart home product, I'm buying it for what it can currently do. And if it can do something in the future, that's a bonus to me, quite honestly. But when something is taken away, now I own something that I bought that did X, but now it doesn't do that. It only does Y. And I'm like, that's just not right. Think about a non-connected device. I'm going to pick a random thing, a lawnmower, whatever, a push mower. Nobody's going to come in your garage in the middle of the night and change the blades so that it no longer can be adjusted for the height of the grass.
Right.
Right? And if they did, wouldn't you be ticked? Like I bought a lawnmower that I have adjustable blades so that I can cut it high when it's wet and low when it's not. And I just have a real issue with this now. And I don't know why the Google News bit really got me thinking about it, but it did. And I don't know what the solution is.
So the solution is probably not buying these connected devices. I don't know if you remember the great Kindle debacle of 2012 or 2011 when Kindle pulled George Orwell's 1984.
Yes.
Hugely ironic.
Yes. Books that people paid for. Exactly. Yes.
You would think that by now we would have some sort of rules in place, but we don't. And Cory Doctorow is a really good person to read on this if you're interested in this issue, just because both in fiction and in essays, he talks a lot about this. And it is scary.
So I have a startup idea. Don't anybody steal it. But I think there should be a company that is a firewall of sorts between my smart home and my smart home cloud vendors, and it manages my updates and tells me, hey, they pushed this update to me. Do you want me to push it to your devices? Here's what it does. I don't want them to have that control. And I think there needs to be some middleware, in a sense, that I control that notifies me that this feature is coming in or this feature is getting taken away on all of my devices. And we're going to talk about smart things in this regard a little later in the show.
Yeah.
It applies to them. It applies to all of them. I'm really thinking there needs to be some type of light server in between.
Okay. Interesting idea.
VC people, if you're listening, just call me direct.
Call Kevin. Okay. And kind of related, but a little different, just in the sense that we were talking about wake words earlier. Google is now letting you opt into having humans hear your utterances, as it were, the things that it thinks you said its name and it records. There was a big kerfuffle a while back about Google, Amazon, and Apple having human contractors listen to these. People didn't realize this was happening, and so they were upset. Now Google's saying, hey, we still want to send this stuff in, but you do need to opt into it, which I think is the right way to do it. I understand why they want real people in the mix, because real people can understand other people better than machines. Mm-hmm. And you do want to continuously improve these algorithms. So I probably would opt into this, mostly because I don't do a lot of dicey stuff. My speakers aren't in areas that I feel are private areas of the home. So that's just me. But your mileage may vary. In other Google news, and this is part of we'll just call it the earthquake section of the podcast, Google Android phones are now part of a giant seismometer. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. I mean, it's interesting to see these literally billions of phones with sensors, accelerometers in this particular case, being used to possibly identify earthquakes. Basically, if your phone detects something that it may think is an earthquake, it'll send a signal over to Google's earthquake detection center, and then they'll try and crowdsource it and see, is that happening to other people or has somebody just got the shakes? I don't know. So it's an interesting approach. I don't know if you can opt out or not, but I would hope so. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, there's another option out there, and this one requires a little bit different level of hardware, but it is an open source software project. And this is Project It's Open EEW. This is created by a company called Grillo, which makes earthquake sensors. They are a Mexican company. They make these sensors, and they've open sourced their software. And IBM, USAID, and the Clinton Foundation, plus Aero Electronics, are outfitting more places with this hardware to tie it all together to predict earthquakes in all parts of the world. So this is just another earthquake prediction system. This one uses specialized hardware as opposed to Android phones. So I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know.
It's not something a consumer is going to install. It's literally something that local governments are installing. The sensor that connects to open Wi-Fi or LTE, if it needs to be fitted with LTE, and that data is fed into the appropriate departments that study the earthquakes.
Or municipal systems that send out alerts. It probably would be, I want to say, more reliable, or at least municipally sanctioned, maybe, is a way to think of it. Like, so it's not just like from your phone to everyone. It's more like from this hardware sensor to public agency and then to everyone. So different process. Anyway, let's talk about DEF CON, because that was happening. And it was a virtual event, as many events are, but hackers got a hack. They are still doing it. So first story from here that I thought was kind of fun was a group of researchers in the Netherlands. They have hacked traffic lights, but not the way you normally would if you're envisioning them physically trying to access them or using RF signals to access them. They did not. Instead, they went to apps and they basically told these apps that there were a bunch of invisible bicycles waiting for the light and forced the lights to change. This is a hack in the sense of it's not really social engineering, it's app engineering.
This is the best kind of hack because it's not a code-based hack, which you can protect against. This is exploiting the system by the way it was designed.
I thought this was really good. What they ended up doing was delaying traffic in, I think it was 10 cities. What was scary is you could do that remotely from anywhere in the world. I'm sure some of these apps that they're using have patched and disabled access this way. So we'll see. But fun story. Less fun. Your August smart lock has a flaw. It's a similar flaw to what happened with Ring, but the flaw allows your Wi-Fi network to be open. And I'm going to put a big old caveat on this. PC Mag reported this. They've got a partnership with Bitdefender to basically see if you can hack various IoT devices. I think it's a great project. I'm sad that I have not been doing that. What was I thinking, Kevin? Anyway, so this one, they found that if you have an August lock and you reset it, then when you try to have it join your Wi-Fi network again, someone can intercept your credentials during that process. This is again the handshake, the Wi-Fi handshake, where the Wi-Fi device says, I'm a this, and the password is this, let me on the network. And then it's like, okay, sure. These hacks are not uncommon. I actually had Nightline come and they hired a hacker to hack my old home, and they did this type of attack. It took him a day to try to catch the handshakes. When they finally caught it, they actually had to get the password from that, and they had to use a supercomputer for that. So the moral of this story is this is a vulnerability.
Let me just add a little more color here, because according to Bitdefender, the encryption key in the August Lock firmware is encrypted, but it's using a simple cipher called ROT-13, which stands for rotate 13. So A becomes N. Add 13 to the letter numbers 1 to 26. And the key is basically obscured. It's really not encrypted. And as a result, that is making this a very easy hack. But again, only at the time you set up the connection between the August lock and your Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, you have to reset the lock. The hardware for that is on the inside of your house.
Or setting up a new lock. Yeah, like if I see somebody walking around with an August box, they just got home from Lowe's or wherever they bought it from, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to snoop now.
And get on their Wi-Fi network. Okay, so that's your option. Another little bug is in HDL Automation. This company makes automation software for hotel rooms, some enterprises. They basically, when they added a new user, they could create a new account and thus get on the network and then start changing processes.
Yeah, and this is lazy coding as well, because there's a debug account set up in a SQL database for this software that runs everything. And you could basically register an email address for the debug username and get instructions to change the password. And then debug means, hey, I'm going to go nose around and figure out what's wrong with the database. Or in this case, I'm going to go hack the database.
Yes. And we've saved the best for last because this is a whopper. This is a story from Ars Technica describing how a researcher hacked satellite communications. There are several ways this happened. These are documented issues with satellite communications. The first being that you should never send anything unencrypted over a satellite network because people can access unencrypted data very easily. That was part one of like how bad this is. Encrypt. The other aspect of this, the first time this researcher did this research, they focused on ships, maritime traffic. This most recent version of it, they said, hey, let's look at airplanes and what people using satellite internet to connect to Wi-Fi on airplanes are doing. But COVID had hit. There were fewer passengers sending stuff, but they did notice that they could see crew data and that they were sending information over the same networks that the telematics and in-flight entertainment networks were using. So basically, they did not have two separate networks, which you really should have if you've got a critical safety thing like flying a plane. And I'm not saying all of the plane flight avionics are on that network. That's a little unclear. But some of the data that goes and pulls data from the avionics network is using the consumer Wi-Fi, as it were. And that's bad news. All right, so no fun security stories. Let's talk about smart things. Speaking of no fun, it's time. Or rather, it's close to time. On August 14th, that is when Smart Things Classic is going to stop working. We mentioned this a couple weeks ago. We still don't have a whole lot of information on everything that's going to stop working, but we now know when it's going to stop working.
Yeah, there's a bunch of updates. I mean, yes, the new Smart Things app, you're going to have to start using that very soon. There's going to be some updates in a good way for voice assistants with Smart Things, that by September 8th, the old legacy versions of the Smart Things Madam A skill and action on Google will be sunset. They have new skills and actions to integrate there that include faster response times, more device support, and abilities to control multiple locations. So that's a good thing. But yeah, if you hung on the Classic for this long, I hate to tell you, but you gotta let go. You just gotta do it.
It's time. That's some of the Smart Things news. The good news is some of the cloud-based stuff is going to be replaced with something that runs locally on the Smart Things hub, so that's exciting. But that does mean that some of your cloud-connected devices are going to stop working without you taking some action. So go start the transition, because you have until August 14th until the actual app dies, but the transition starts happening August 17th, I think, is the first date that something changes.
As we've mentioned, but it's probably worth another mention for this particular audience, if you have a custom device handler on Smart Things or a non-supported device on your hub that you've been able to finagle, you may be losing access to that through Smart Things very soon. Goes back to what I was saying.
Yes, it does.
No control.
No control. We knew this. We have been through this before. This is one of those issues that we still haven't figured out. This is why I talk about trust. And I feel like the industry has totally screwed up trust. I'll be honest. I don't remember what it was I was thinking about today, but I was like, I don't even want to connect anything to the internet anymore. I get not enough value for what I'm having to feel like I give up. But that's another conversation.
I'm just going to unplug everything, and I think I'm done with this show.
Feeling a come to Jesus moment happening for me. I don't know. All right, let's talk about Wise. If you're interested in the Wise doorbell, which is not out, but is coming out, over at That's Not Funny, they found an FCC issue or FCC listing for the Wise doorbell chime. Basically, this is something that you plug into an outlet and you will have it ring wherever you are in your house or wherever it is in your house when someone rings your doorbell. This is in case you don't have your phone on you or you can't hear the doorbell from the doorbell chime that's actually in your house. And not all houses have doorbell chimes, as I discovered in this house, or they don't have working ones.
But one thing we did learn from the FCC filing is that the chime will connect to a Wise Cam or Wise Cam Pan through the Wise sensor bridge, which is not included with the chime itself. That led Dave Zatz to think maybe, just maybe, the chime will be able to be configured so that if the camera sees something, you might get a chime. I don't think he's right on that. I think it's just going to rely on the sensor bridge as the communications to a Wi-Fi network, but he could be right. I do not know.
Okay. Also, in brief news, a UK court has said that police use of facial recognition violates human rights. So stop it. We're seeing a lot more movement on this, so I should probably have someone on the show talk about what we should be thinking about, wanting, and looking for in this sort of legislation. In fitness news, The Mirror, the company that raised a lot of money that we talked about a couple weeks ago. It is a mirror that you work out in front of, and it has a subscription. It also shows you classes, and then it also has lots of sensors that say, hey, you can work harder. So do it. There's another company doing this called Carbon. They have an Indiegogo, a crowdfunding campaign.
I don't know if I trust an Indiegogo product launch. However, you never know. This really does look a lot like The Mirror, which Lululemon has now purchased. We mentioned that a few shows back. It does the same kind of things. It's got the same types of sensors. They're including a year's worth of subscriptions with the pre-order, but it's still $1,750. The Mirror was $14.95, but then you had a monthly $39 subscription fee. So it's about the same price. It's just interesting that there's competition here now all of a sudden.
And I think I called it Carbon, but it's really the Carbon Trainer.
Carbon's trainer.
Yes.
It's the trainer mirror from Carbon.
And sleep tracking. Do you want native sleep tracking on your Apple Watch? Well, Kevin will tell you how to get that.
Yeah, you can get that as of this week because the first public beta for watchOS is available. And I use the developer betas of things with iOS, and mostly they're okay. By the time they get to public beta, they're pretty stable. So I don't think you're at any risk to try this if you'd like to upgrade your Apple Watch. You have native sleep tracking. So you can do that. There's a way to just go to the Apple site. We can put a link in the show notes for that, and you'll have native sleep tracking, which I'm not a big fan of. And yet, since switching to this Garmin, I've worn it every night, and I'm looking at my sleep data.
Oh, I love my sleep data. I'm constantly like, hey, does this feel right? It does. Or, ooh, okay. Now it is time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline. That's right. It's the section of the show where we hear from y'all. Please, if you have a question or just want to share and enter to win a contest to win a Schlage lock, you can give us a call at 512-623-7424. And this section is brought to you by Schlage. The best home automation adds convenience, not hassle. With its built-in Wi-Fi, the Schlage Encode Smart Wi-Fi Deadbolt shows you just how easy secure can be. You can learn more at schlage.com. All right, this week our question comes from Barry, who is from New York and is wondering about the security of signing into lots of apps. Let's hear it.
Hi, Stacey. This is Barry from New York. My question involves security on IoT devices. I use the 3-dumb router configuration so that IoT devices are supposedly segmented in their own internal network. However, I have some concerns about it given your discussion with Kevin about it. My predominant question, though, is for IoT devices, a lot of these devices that I've seen require an external account with, for example, Wise insists that you set up a Wise account. And I'm wondering what the security implications of that could be. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Barry. I like that you've already segmented your network. It feels like you are really focused on security. So the two things that are really important here is not reusing the same password, and two,
For each of these accounts,
for
yes.
each of these accounts, right? Every account needs its own password. And two, I'm going to say two-factor where you can, because that's going to help here. But your biggest risk in this situation is if you reuse your password, it's that your password that you use for all kinds of things could get out if that company's servers get hacked. So that's risk number one. So don't do that. Not reusing your passwords is going to help tremendously there, because then you're only going to lose that particular password if their servers get hacked. The other thing that could happen to you with these accounts is that, like, if it's a camera or something special, if it's a camera or something that has data that you really don't want shared, I would use two-factor authentication. So if they do get hacked, or if they're just careless with your data, it's harder for someone who hacks into it to actually access your feeds and your data.
I should point out, this is not specifically to Barry, but this is really to the device makers. This is why two-factor should actually be through authentication apps, not through SMS, because if they do get hacked, they could get your phone number at that point, and then they could SIM swap or spoof your phone number and get the two-factor, and then it's useless at that point.
And this is also where we should say, hey, when you buy a device, it's not enough to look at just the device security, right? So they can do everything right. They can encrypt. Actually, if they encrypt the data at rest, that's pretty good, actually. But if your app or data is stored in the cloud improperly, then that opens things up. So you need to make sure that they're encrypting data when it's at rest in the cloud. You need to make sure that they understand the risk that having third-party companies working on their database, for example, entails. They need to be building things and not using production data to test it. There's all kinds of stuff. And that's not stuff that you're going to be able to tell really as a consumer, which is why I really encourage people to work with trusted devices and then also never reuse your password.
Yeah, and props to Barry for keeping his network segmented, because even if a device gets hacked, your Wi-Fi credentials could be stored with your personal information in the cloud, because there's a Wi-Fi setup typically with a lot of these devices. So if worst case is they even got that Wi-Fi password, it would only be for your segmented network and not your whole house, which is awesome. So way to go, Barry.
Yeah. And I will say, device makers, you don't have to have someone's Wi-Fi password and credentials most of the time.
You shouldn't be storing it.
Yeah, you shouldn't be storing it. I know plenty of companies who are like, yeah, we looked at that and we were like, yeah, we don't want that. Let's dump that data.
Let's cut that out. No more of that.
All right. Thank you, Barry. Remember, if you have a question or you just want to be entered to win the Schleg Lock for the month of August, woohoo, give us a call at 512-623-7424 and we'll enter you to win. And that concludes this segment of the podcast. Please stay tuned for Bill Byther, the CEO of Machine Metrics, who's going to come on and talk to us about factory data, machine data, sharing data, and the impact of COVID-19 on manufacturing. All of this and more after a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Very. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Very. Very is a fully distributed IoT engineering firm partnering with clients to build systems for smart manufacturing, smart energy and utilities, consumer electronics, and connected wellness. And today I have Ben Wald, who is the founder and head of client strategy at Very, here to talk to me. So Ben very often works with industrial clients on IoT projects. Can you tell us about how you are helping them?
Absolutely. So manufacturers who have the ability to do remote monitoring and predictive maintenance on their machines have a competitive advantage. Study after study shows that these capabilities help companies shift away from time-based and scheduled maintenance, more efficiently utilize their consumables and their workforce in general, increase productivity, maximize machine and part life, improve workplace safety, and ultimately reduce unplanned downtime.
Excellent. So what does Very actually do or build with clients?
That is a great question. So we build custom solutions. In many cases, we're working with companies who actually build the equipment and help them add more value to their machines, maybe create visibility that they didn't have before, and sometimes even open up new revenue streams. So getting tactical, we help these equipment manufacturers build devices to retrofit existing equipment with new capabilities, send data to the cloud, and use the right machine learning models to find patterns, highlight anomalies, and capture insights from the operators on the ground. That's typically the critical step here, is pairing software with human intelligence. And it's really where a lot of quote unquote universal solutions fail. The next step is the last mile element, where we are taking these insights and integrating with existing systems that are handling the maintenance scheduling and some of the consumable ordering. As a quick example, we recently built and launched a device that both retrofits to older models and comes embedded with newer machines in the corrugation industry. It collects and sends over 2,000 data points from the machine to the cloud, and our machine learning model looks for anomalies outside of some predefined thresholds. We then allow and have created an interface for operators to label those events, which means the system gets smarter each day. The last mile is that we've then integrated this platform into their maintenance scheduling system, their consumable ordering platform, and their CRM, so that if they get a support request, the company can have insights into what may have led to that component failing, and on the maintenance side, only perform maintenance when it's necessary.
That sounds really comprehensive. So where do I go to learn more about how Very can help me with my industrial IoT project?
You can reach out to us at verypossible.com/Stacy. That's VERY possible.com/STACEY.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Bill Byther, who is the CEO and co-founder of Machine Metrics. Hello, Bill. How are you today?
Hi, Stacey. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm so glad to have you on the show. So we should probably kick it off by telling people a little bit about what Machine Metrics does.
So Machine Metrics is an industrial IoT platform that really specializes around machines in discrete manufacturing. Basically, what we do is we make it very easy to capture and transform data from your equipment on your shop floor. We make that data actionable through increased visibility, predictive analytics, and workflows that are configurable that drives and automates manufacturing processes. Basically, what we're doing is building the operating system for the automated factory.
If you think about a machine floor, you're talking about different machines from different manufacturers. They're all throwing off information, possibly like some of them may be calibrated for one type of like Fahrenheit versus Celsius. So you guys pull in all of that information into one place and provide the analytics on it, correct?
Yeah. So the challenge with the factory floor, and like you said, is that you have a wide variety of different types of equipment. Each machine basically talks a different language. So there's one of the real challenges in manufacturing to run analytics is that you might have data for each of these machines, but each machine requires different analysis to be written. But if you take that data and you transform it and you essentially put it into a consistent data structure, then you can run analytics on all of your machines. And essentially, the machines can then talk amongst each other. And that's really what enables some of the more advanced visualizations and analytics, AI, and predictive analytics work that we help our customers with.
And are you working on the analytics for individual machines? Or are you looking at it as these machines as part of an overarching system?
We look at it as both. Initially, when our customers leverage our technology, it's some really basic use cases around visibility. A lot of factories don't even have great visibility in their operations, and that could be on a single machine or a cell or a whole system. And then when you take the next step, you might really tie different processes together. So not just your production and your machining, but your quality and inspection. Essentially, and I'm going to use a sort of a jargony term here that you might have heard of, which is called the digital thread. The digital thread really is about taking the entire manufacturing process from the design of the component that you're producing through to the production, and then the quality and inspection through the supply chain, delivering to your customer, and then feeding that information back. And really, what the way that we look at our product, Machine Metrics, is it's the machine data component of that digital thread, which really is more than just a single machine. It's the entire process, the entire manufacturing process. But we really kind of take that one component of that process, and then that data then flows to the other components of the manufacturing process, which is essentially the digital thread.
Okay, so real talk time. I have been hearing about this concept. I think I've heard it called a digital thread a couple times, but I've been hearing about that concept probably since 2013 or so, when GE got all excited about, industrial IoT. I feel like it's an alt talk, no cattle thing, or alt talk, no hat. I can't remember what that is. I'm a terrible Texan. So do you know anybody who's doing this? How far along are we on this? Or are we still in the, one day we'll do it?
There is a lot of talk around this. The thing is, there isn't just anybody. There isn't just one company that can say, we have the digital thread. It really takes collaboration between many vendors and many companies and customers to really say this is the digital thread. I would guess you say that the traditional manufacturing back office systems, your big ERP systems, they really try to own the whole process, from design all the way through. But what we find is that these big systems are pretty inflexible. So we really see this ecosystem being developed, just like in other industries where you have these enterprise SaaS applications, really vertical applications that solve a problem really deeply and really well. And that's where I start to see the digital thread come to be, where you have, each subsystem that does their job really well starts to communicate through these, essentially, for lack of a better term, like an API, right? So data can flow from one system to the next, and then you can feed that back to improve your product based on the data that lives on the digital thread. We don't see a lot of practical, good examples of this yet, because it's just being developed in manufacturing.
Got it. You mentioned a couple things that I really wanted to dig into with you, which is this idea of collaboration, data sharing, and building out ecosystems, which you mentioned this is tough. Companies do not want to do this. So let's talk from a very practical standpoint, because you're pulling data in from all of these manufacturers. And this, I assume, is at the behest of the factory owners. So they've bought the equipment, they own the equipment, they can ask you to do whatever you want. But are you also working with the manufacturers of that equipment to try to get access to that data?
Yeah, so that is definitely one of the, the low-hanging fruit of manufacturing data. Because if you think about, say, a machine on a factory floor produces a lot of data, sometimes those machines break down. And the builders of those machines have difficulty really extracting that data from their customers. They often have to go on site. They have to run their own systems on the machines, or go to the control and pull it out. If you democratize that data, you make it easily available to the machine builder, to the actual manufacturer, to other vendors. You make it much easier to be able to maintain the equipment, to service it. And if you do this at scale, where you have, say, as a machine builder, I have many of my customers with access to that data, you can start to really build out more predictive solutions to anticipate failure. And that's really one of the prime benefits of making this data accessible and sharing it beyond just the factory floor. And it's something that we've done successfully amongst our machine builder customers, and they've been able to improve their service with the end customer, the manufacturer.
What is the journey that they have to undergo to be willing to share that information?
So there's a couple aspects of sharing data. A manufacturer isn't just going to want to share the data, right? There needs to be value associated with that. So as long as you're able to provide the value, it's actually not that difficult of a conversation. There's certain data on a factory floor that you wouldn't necessarily want to share, like engineering information, or you have to be even more careful, I should say. But for production data, maintenance data, it's that's a little bit easier for a manufacturer to want to share. Our customers can opt into this program of data sharing, and the value that they get immediately from that is benchmarking data. So they can understand how their equipment is performing compared to other Machine Metrics customers. And that's a value that we can add to the customer. And the other place where we can add value to the customer is when it's us, or if it's even the machine builder. By having more information, like more failure data, more label data, we're able to build better algorithms to help our customers keep their machines up and running, at a better efficiency.
So when we talk about value, how are you sharing that value back with the machine manufacturer? Or are they like, hey, a happy customer, that's enough value for us?
Yeah, I guess for the machine builder, their value is number one. It's they have customers that their machines they're more productive than their competitors. So that gives that's one point of value. They less often they sell machines that are under warranty for a couple of years, and they're able to solve problems remotely when they have remote access to that data. So it saves them the cost of having to fly out to fix a machine. Especially relevant right now during the pandemic. And finally, the other value that they bring their customers is just better understanding of how their equipment is actually used in the field, and better design. That's where you really close the loop on the design of your product.
Got it. Okay, so that seems very positive. Now, what about the customers themselves? I know that Machine Metrics aggregates data and then shares it across industries, for example. Do your customers, when we think about making the industry overall more efficient or better, are they okay with their data getting shared?
Yeah, number one, the data is anonymized, so there's no. You can't really point back to any particular customer or anything that identifies a job or a client, a name, a customer, or an employee, anything like that. The data that's shared back would be just the performance of the overall performance or utilization rate of their equipment. So the value that they get, and I'll give you a couple case studies of that. Like we have a medical device manufacturer that started with Machine Metrics, and they started receiving their benchmarking reports and realized that they were in the top 10% in terms of performance of all Machine Metrics customers. And that kind of helped them make a decision to insource some of their work, because they figured that their supply chain was unlikely to be as performant as they were. So they made a decision to bring work in-house, and that really helped them build more product and grow their business. On the contrary, we have customers that see that they're in the lower percentile of performance. And, they're buying machines. And, this data really helps to justify equipment purchases or, in these cases, justify investing in your internal operations to improve performance before you, buy your next $500,000 machine. And so we see those are just some benefits of sharing the data, because by sharing your performance data and then seeing the aggregate back, you can make those types of decisions.
Got it. There is like a tragedy of the commons in sharing data that we can see so far.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's, there's other side benefits to, like if you go to our website, machinemetrics.com, you'll see, we're able to produce sort of the industry performance report. Because Machine Metrics, I mean, we've connected to thousands of machines across hundreds of customers. And we have a kind of our finger on the pulse of manufacturing, and the finger on the pulse is really in real time. So we're able to publish data that shows how the industry is performing. And you can see that even when the pandemic hit us, you could see the impact that that's had across different industries. For example, we saw that drop of manufacturing through the pandemic, and it came back. It dropped 20%. It came back within 5% of last year, before the sort of the July 4th holiday, and it is kind of struggling to right around that 6%, 7% mark to try to come back to where we were last year. But it's not so bad. It's not so bad right now. And this is a benefit of that aggregated data that we share with our customers, so that they, again, can kind of see how their business relates to the overall.
Yes, I'm sitting here going, wow, it's at 6%. That's or coming back within 6%. That's actually better than I thought. I'll have to come back to you in a couple of months after this is extended further than maybe many of us thought would happen, to see where it's going. Do you have any trend indicators so far?
Yeah. Well, it was coming back pretty rapidly before July 4th. I thought that maybe it would actually cross and be equal or better than we were last year. But it seems like after there was a change after that holiday, and it kind of dropped a little bit, went from like 5% down to 7% of a decline. So I don't know whether we're on a decline down or it's kind of stagnated. It's hard to know.
It's hard out there. What are your successful companies, the ones who are been able to adapt to the current circumstances? What are they doing? Do you have any insight into that, just so we can share that with people?
Yeah. So early on in the pandemic, we saw a lot of plant shutdowns and a huge change to the supply stream. And one of the things that we saw happen amongst especially our smaller customers, is that they quickly changed to make parts like they've gone from making, say, automotive parts to ventilator parts. We even have a customer, they're a tier 1 automotive customer. They went from making automotive parts to making ventilators within 3 months. They're out of Latin America. Really impressive, because they kept their people instead of having to furlough or lay off their people because automotive basically shut down. They started making ventilators and created a new line of business for their company. So there's been a lot of innovation during this pandemic. But one of the things that we've seen is this might not be long lasting. So there's the companies that are, and this is why I think there's a dichotomy between the really smaller manufacturers and the larger. The ones that are a bit stronger, they're able to invest more in digitizing their operations. And that's where we're seeing more, just more investment, more improvement and an acceleration of IoT amongst manufacturing. More successful manufacturers that where leadership has to decide, we're going to, really cut our costs, get through this pandemic, or we're going to invest in our operations so that when we come out of this, we're going to be even more competitive. To me, it's pretty clear that, those are the companies who can afford to do that are really going to shine as a result once everything is back to where it was. And, we really help those customers in their digitization efforts because, we're so focused on the data on the factory floor.
Got it. And that makes sense. I mean, downturns are always an opportunity for something like that. Okay, so let's go back to data sharing. Let's go back to the supply chain, because you mentioned in one of your case studies that they looked at their data and they realized they needed to insource because their supply chain wasn't keeping up. And I feel like there's a huge opportunity to start sharing data among your suppliers to deliver. Maybe it's just in time, although we're learning that that's maybe not the ideal way to go, given disruptions in the supply chain. But being able to view the supply chain, have a sense of what's coming, what might delay it, and the quality of what's in there. Are you seeing any companies that are particularly aggressive about this or doing anything interesting with regards to, I guess, extending that digital thread down their supply chain?
There is a lot of interest. I don't see a lot of action yet, but I think that that's slowly changing. There's a top-down effort. So if you talk to the larger manufacturers, they would love nothing more than to have visibility into their supply chain. But then if you talk about, the smaller manufacturers, there's a competitive nature. There's a risk factor in sharing that data. So, we see that this is naturally going to happen over time. We definitely provide that ability, the capability, but I can't say that everyone is doing it. I think that this is going to take time. It's going to take a different level of trust. You might see technologies like blockchain kind of, helping us get there. Right now, it's more visionary than it is a reality. The technology is there, but I'm not sure whether the industry is quite ready yet to fully adopt sharing data across the entire supply chain. I would love nothing more, but there's a lot of work to do.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about that work. You said that you think the technology is there. You could use things like blockchain, but the trust is lacking. Is that trust that you can build contractually? Is that trust between, like, you must shake hands with your person? Like, help me understand what's holding this back.
Yeah, I think it is a trust. And, there's just a nature in industry that, things take time. There's initiatives going on, like, for example, we're part of the World Economic Forum, and it's been it's known that there's so much value to unlock. I think they've stated there's $100 billion to unlock if we can just get there. One of the challenges, it's like I said before, it's not just one vendor that can solve this problem. It's a collaboration of many, and you kind of have to, I guess, walk before you run. So take the baby steps. Share. I think quality data is currently being shared amongst the supply chain. So maybe going a little bit deeper, let's talk about, production data. Can that be shared? And, I think if we take these steps slowly, we'll get there. But I think that it's going to kind of come from the top down. It's going to be the OEMs that require that data is shared. And they're starting to, where that's going to unlock this capability. Because if you need to compete to win a deal with an OEM, and part of that is you have to share your data, well, then I guess you will, right?
I hope so. All right. Well, Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.